For 17 years, and not even a proper goodbye. My name is Robert Davis. I'm 53 years old, a lead transport operator for Heartland Logistics, based out of Des Moines, Iowa. I started with them when they were just a couple of vans and a vision. Now they had 35 big rigs, handling deliveries for some major suppliers across the Midwest, and a new manager who didn't seem to value the people who built the place. When Heartland Logistics was bought out by some big money firm last spring, I knew things would be different. I just didn't think I'd be the first one shown the door. The new operations boss, Scott Peterson, had a fancy degree and shiny shoes that looked like they'd never seen the inside of a truck cab. He'd been looking at my pay for weeks, talking about legacy expenses in meetings. That morning, I'd finished a 5-day trip to Chicago, right on time like always, when Scott called me into his office with glass walls. The papers ending my job were already printed. The young guy meant to replace me, fresh out of training, was waiting in the staff room. "We need to make things more efficient," Scott said, not looking me in the eye. "It's nothing personal, just about the numbers. Your salary is almost double what we can pay someone new." I just nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't tell him that Central Grocers had used us exclusively for 9 years because I'd helped their dock manager move his mother's things when her care home closed. Didn't mention that Northern Supplies renewed their contract 4 times because I always found a way to get their urgent loads moved, even on holidays. 17 years with a perfect safety record. Never missed a single delivery time. Knew most clients by their first name. "You'll get 2 weeks' pay as severance," Scott went on, pushing the papers across his desk. "Company rule." I signed without reading. Handed over my keys, my security pass, and the company credit card. Said thank you for the chance. Out in the parking lot, I sat in my pickup for maybe an hour, not angry, just thinking. Thinking about the clients who'd become more like friends over the years. About the holiday cards I got from shipping managers in 8 different states. About how this Scott guy just didn't get that in this business. Deliveries happened because of good relationships just as much as they did because of fuel. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom Baker at Central Grocers himself. "Heard what happened. Those suits are idiots. Call me." Then another came in from Steve at Northern Supplies. "Is this true about you leaving? Let's talk before you decide anything." By the time I drove out of Heartland's lot, 4 more messages had arrived. I didn't answer right away. Just drove home and sat on my front porch, watching the sun turn the Iowa sky orange. They'd fired a driver, but they'd lost something much more valuable. I started at Heartland back when it was just old man Miller and his son trying to build something solid. Miller taught me everything. How to handle mountain passes in the snow, how to talk to people, how to fix problems on the road without calling for help. "This trucking business isn't about the trucks," he'd say. "It's about trust." For 17 years, I built that trust 1 mile at a time. When the big snowstorm hit Minneapolis in 2018, I was the one who got the medical supplies through to 4 hospitals. When floods washed out the main road to Omaha, I found the back routes. When Central Grocers needed an emergency load of boxes after a fire, I drove for 42 hours straight to make it happen. My wife, Lisa, knew the routine. Sometimes I'd be gone for days, but I always came back with stories. Our kids grew up with me on the road half the time, but they never doubted I'd be there for the big moments. Missed a few basketball games, sure, but never a graduation or a birthday party. When Miller sold the company about 7 years ago, things started to change slowly. At first, new rules, more paperwork, less flexibility. The new management kept me on because the clients asked for me by name. "Send Robert," they'd say. "We know it'll get there if he's driving." Scott arrived maybe 8 months ago, fresh from some big logistics place in New York. Started talking about performance metrics and rotating drivers. Couldn't figure out why we let certain clients pick their own delivery times. Couldn't understand why Central Grocers got special treatment. "They aren't our biggest customer," he'd argue in meetings. "No," I'd try to explain. "But they're our most loyal. Been with us since the start." He'd give that fake corporate smile. Loyalty doesn't show up on a balance sheet. I started seeing the problems forming. Heard whispers about raising prices for our oldest customers. Saw how Scott hired drivers based on the lowest pay they'd take, not how good they were at the job. Watched him cut corners on repairs. About 3 weeks ago, I pulled him aside after he yelled at Mike, one of our best mechanics, for spending too much time on routine maintenance. "You're going to lose good people," I warned him. Scott just laughed. "Everyone's replaceable, Robert. That's just business 101. I didn't argue, just went back to my routes, checking in with clients, making my deliveries, keeping things running while the ground beneath us started to crack. I didn't realize I'd be the first one they decided to replace. After sitting on my porch for an hour, I finally looked at those messages. Tom Baker wanted to meet for coffee tomorrow. Steve from Northern Supplies asked if I had plans to drive for another company. Carol at Plains Provisions just sent a string of angry symbols followed by, "Call me." I went inside, made some coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. Lisa was working late at the hospital. The house felt too quiet. I pulled out my logbooks. 17 years of work, deliveries, building connections. Heartland didn't own those. They'd fired the driver, but they'd forgotten about the relationships I'd built. My phone rang. It was Miller. Must have heard the news through the grapevine. "It's a damn shame what they're doing to my old company," he said, his voice rough with age and anger. "I never should have sold." "You did what you had to do," I said. "Your wife's medical bills." "Still," he cut in. "I built that place on relationships, not on spreadsheets. These new guys don't understand the business." After we hung up, I looked at my hands, rough and worn from years of driving, loading, solving problems. 17 years gone with one signature. The next morning, I met Tom Baker at the local cafe. He didn't waste time. "I heard what happened," he said, sliding into the booth. "Bunch of fools. You've personally saved us more times than I can count." "Just doing my job," I said. "No." Tom shook his head. "You did more than that. Remember when our cooling system failed at the warehouse in Ames? You got that delivery to our backup spot at 3 a.m. during a snowstorm." I shrugged. "Freight doesn't wait for good weather." Tom leaned forward. "We have a deal with Heartland, but it has a 45-day exit clause. Who are you going to drive for next? Because that's where our business is going." I hadn't even thought about what was next yet, but Tom's words planted a seed. By lunchtime, I'd met with Steve from Northern Supplies, who said the exact same thing. By dinner, 6 more clients had reached out with similar messages. Driving home, I drove past Heartland's yard, saw my old truck, already given to that young driver. Through the office windows, I could see Scott in a meeting, pointing at charts on a screen. That's when it hit me. Scott saw drivers as just parts that could be swapped out, but clients saw us as relationships. For 17 years, I'd been the face of Heartland to most of our big customers. I wasn't just a driver. I was their trusted partner. I pulled into my driveway, my mind racing. Called my buddy Dave, who'd left Heartland last year to drive for someone else. "What would it take?" I asked. "To start our own company?" Dave was quiet for a second. "You serious about this, Robert?" "Never been more serious in my life." "You'd need money, permits, insurance," he started listing. "And clients," I added, "which I seem to have." That night, Lisa found me at the kitchen table buried in notes and numbers. "What's all this?" she asked. I said slowly, "I'm starting a trucking business." 5 days after being fired, I walked back into Heartland's office. Not to beg for my job back, I was past that, but to grab my personal stuff from my locker and talk to a few of the drivers I'd helped train over the years. Scott spotted me in the break room, chatting with Sam and Jose, 2 drivers who'd started under my guidance. His face got dark as he marched over. "Robert, this is private property," he said. "You can't just show up and mess things up." "Just collecting my things," I said, holding up my old thermos and the family photo that had been in my locker, and saying goodbye to some friends. Scott crossed his arms. "I've heard you've been talking to our customers. So, this is what that's about. News travels fast in this business." "They called me," I corrected, "to ask why I wasn't delivering their loads anymore." "Well, stop it," Scott snapped. Those are Heartland accounts. Messing with our customer relationships could be seen as illegally interfering with business deals. He said each word like he'd practiced it with a lawyer. Maybe he had. Can't control who calls me, I said, keeping my voice steady. Or what they decide about their shipping needs. Scott stepped closer. Listen carefully, Robert. You signed papers about not competing and not trying to take our customers when you joined Heartland. If you try to steal our clients, we'll drown you in legal bills. I hadn't expected this. Couldn't afford a big court fight. 17 years of being loyal, and now they were threatening to sue me just for answering phone calls. Check those papers, I said, remembering something important. They ran out after 12 years. Miller made sure of that. Scott's face turned red. He clearly hadn't done his homework. Regardless, he managed. This is your one warning. Stay away from our customers. I nodded, picked up my things, and walked out. In the parking lot, Sam and Jose caught up with me. He's running this place into the ground, Sam mumbled. Cutting corners on fixes, pushing drivers to break the rules about how long they can drive. 4 guys quit just last week, Jose added, replacing them with greenhorns who'll work for next to nothing. I'd had my suspicions, but hearing it confirmed made my gut clench. Not just because of the business side, but because of safety. Trucks that aren't kept up and drivers who are tired are a recipe for disaster. You two be careful, was all I said. Back home, I called Miller to ask about those agreements. He confirmed what I remembered. The parts about not competing and not asking clients to switch had expired years ago. I never believed in trapping people forever, he explained. A good business is built on people choosing to be there, not being forced. The next day, I got a certified letter from Heartland's lawyers anyway, threatening legal action if I kept talking to their customers. Just trying to scare me. They had no real case, but they hoped I wouldn't know that or couldn't afford to fight it. That same afternoon, Tom Baker called. Heartland just tried to bump our rates by 20% with no reason, he complained. When I brought up your name, their sales guy got all flustered. One after another, similar calls came in. Heartland was trying hard to hold on to customers using strong-arm tactics and sudden price hikes. Classic moves of a place in trouble. That evening, Dave came over with pizza and drinks. We sat on my back porch working out a business plan. He'd already gathered info on insurance, what permits we'd need, and how much money it would take to start. The numbers looked big, but not impossible, especially if we started with maybe 4 or 5 trucks. We'd need a solid base of sure contracts, Dave said, taking a sip of beer. I looked at my phone, which had been buzzing with customer messages all day. I don't think that's going to be a problem. 1 week later, I was sitting in a small office I'd rented in an industrial area on the east side of Des Moines. Dave had used some money from his retirement. I'd pulled cash from savings, and together we'd managed to get a loan for 4 trucks. Didn't seem like much next to Heartland's big fleet, but it was a start. We'd filed the paperwork to set up Davis and Riley Transport LLC. Applied for our official hauling number. Got the insurance sorted out. Cost a lot, but our clean driving records helped. Even found a decent used truck that would be ready in the next 2 weeks. What I didn't expect was the call from Brenda, Heartland's longtime dispatcher. Robert, you got a minute? Her voice was low, like she was hiding. Always. Brenda. What's going on? It's worse than you know, she said. After you left, Scott brought in some guy who's been looking through all the deals trying to find ways to squeeze more money out of everyone. She paused, and I heard papers rustling. But that's not the worst part. They're planning to close down the Des Moines office completely in about 8 months. Move everything to Minneapolis where they have some tax break deal. Everyone here is going to lose their jobs. They just don't know it yet. The news hit me hard. Heartland had been a fixture in Des Moines for decades. Around 50 families depended on those jobs. How sure are you about this? I asked. 100%. I saw the papers myself when I was filing. Scott left them on his desk, really careless. They've already started looking at storage space in Minneapolis. After she hung up, I sat at my empty desk, just staring at the wall. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the people who would be caught off guard about 8 months from now. Dave arrived with coffee and donuts, excited about the used truck he'd found for a good price. He stopped short when he saw my face. What happened? I told him what Brenda had shared. His face got serious as I spoke. So all this talk about being efficient and streamlining was just a cover-up, he said. They were just planning to dump everyone anyway. Looks that way. Dave sat down, his coffee forgotten. We need to think bigger, Robert. What do you mean? If they're shutting down in 8 months anyway, we should be planning to take on as much of that business as possible, not just a customer here and there. All of it. He was right. This wasn't about getting back at Scott or even just saving my own job anymore. It was about keeping alive what Miller had built, the connections, the trust, the jobs. We spent the rest of the day rewriting our business plan, called our bank contact about loans for more trucks, looked into warehouse space that could work as a simple base of operations. By evening, we had the basics of something much bigger than our first idea of just a few trucks. The next morning, I called Miller and asked him to meet me for lunch. I told him everything. What Brenda had shared, what Dave and I were planning, the hurdles we faced. The old man listened quietly, his hands folded on the table. When I finished, he just nodded once. How much do you need? He asked. Sir. For starting capital. I've got some money put away. Was saving it for a fishing boat, but this seems more important. I hadn't seen this coming. We couldn't ask you to. You're not asking, Miller cut me off. I'm offering. Those people at Heartland. Most of them I hired myself. Known their families for years. I'll be darned if I'll sit back while some corporate buzzards scatter them to the wind. He pulled out his checkbook right there in the restaurant. Let's build something solid this time, he said. Something that lasts. Over the next 3 weeks, Davis, Riley, and Miller Transport took shape incredibly fast. Miller's investment, plus our own money and a business loan, gave us enough cash to lease 7 trucks, get a modest terminal with storage space, and hire key people. We started with the must-haves. Brenda gave notice at Heartland and joined us as dispatcher. 3 experienced mechanics followed, tired of Heartland cutting corners on repairs. We hired 7 drivers, all seasoned pros with great safety records who had either already left Heartland or were planning to. The trucks arrived, 4 Peterbilts and 3 Kenworths. Nothing flashy, but dependable machines. We painted them dark blue with silver stripes, our new company logo on the doors. Each morning, I'd get to our simple terminal before the sun came up and feel a wave of pride seeing those trucks lined up, ready to roll. Meanwhile, Heartland was falling apart. After I left, 5 big clients had taken their business elsewhere, not to us, not yet, but to competitors. They blamed service problems, but really they were just waiting to see if our new operation could handle their needs. Word of the Minneapolis move had gotten out. Morale at Heartland was terrible. Drivers were quitting almost daily. Deliveries were being missed. Scott was in full panic mode, dropping prices to keep clients while cutting back everywhere else. We moved carefully, building our base before taking on too much work. Miller insisted on doing things the right way. Good training, strict maintenance rules, fair pay. The money will come if we focus on doing a good job, he kept saying. By the 4th week, we were ready to talk to clients directly. I started with Central Grocers, my longest relationship. Tom Baker met me in his office, looked over our price lists, insurance papers, and driver details, asked tough questions about how much we could handle and what we'd do if something went wrong. This all looks good, Robert, he said finally. But Heartland just dropped their rates by 22%. They're desperate to keep us. They can't keep those rates up, I replied. And they can't match our service. Plus, there's something you should know. I told him about the Minneapolis move. Tom's face clouded over. So, all their promises about local service and quick help will be impossible to keep once they move. Tom nodded slowly. We'll need to make this switch carefully. Can't have any breaks in our supply chain. We've got a plan for that, I promised, explaining how we'd bring them on gradually. By the end of the meeting, we had a deal sealed with a handshake. Central Grocers would move 30% of their shipping to us right away, with the rest switching over the next 90 days. Similar talks happened with Northern Supplies, Plains Provisions, and 7 other major clients. Not all of them signed up immediately, but most started sending parts of their business our way. We weren't just getting clients. We were getting the good people too. Every couple weeks, another Heartland employee would come looking for work. We couldn't hire everyone, but we took the best ones. Experienced dispatchers, skilled mechanics, drivers you could count on. Then came the moment that showed us we were doing the right thing. Sam, the driver I'd helped train who was still at Heartland, called one evening. "Robert, you won't believe this." "What is it?" "Scott just announced they lost the Summit Builders account." Summit was Heartland's biggest client, covering 35% of their business. "What happened?" "Word is they found out about the Minneapolis move from someone they knew at Northern. They've already signed up with someone else." I asked the obvious question, who did they sign with? Sam laughed. "That's the best part, not you guys. They went with Interstate Logistics. Scott's been running around yelling that you somehow set it up, but everyone knows it's his own mess." Our plan was working better than we'd hoped. We didn't even need to actively chase all of Heartland's business. The company was falling apart on its own. 3 months after being fired, I was back behind the wheel, taking a crucial delivery to Central Grocers. Their main production line had broken down, and they needed replacement parts by morning, just like the old days. Except now the truck I was driving had my company's name on the door. As I backed up to Central's loading dock at 5 a.m., Tom himself was waiting, even though it was so early. "You're a lifesaver, Robert," he said as I handed him the paperwork. "Our production manager says we can be back up and running within an hour now." I helped unload, then joined Tom in his office for coffee. He seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just waiting for confirmation on something," he said, pouring more coffee. "Should be any minute." His phone buzzed. He read the message, then smiled. "It's official. As of this morning, we've ended our contract with Heartland. You're now handling all of our freight." I knew this was coming. We'd been slowly taking on more of their business, but hearing it made official still felt huge. "Appreciate you trusting us," I said simply. "Trust is why you got it," Tom replied. "But you should know you're not the only one. Northern Supplies cut ties with them last week. Plains Provisions the week before. From what I hear, Heartland has lost about 90% of their Des Moines business in the last 7 weeks." On the drive back to our terminal, I passed Heartland's yard. The lot was almost empty. A "For Rent" sign had shown up on the fence. Through the office window, I could see Scott on the phone, waving his arms around wildly. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd thought I might. Just a quiet feeling that things were ending up where they were supposed to be. We hadn't stolen anything. We just built something better, something based on the things that had always truly mattered in this business. Back at our terminal, Miller met me in the break room. "Have you heard," he asked, "about Heartland losing most of their customers?" "Yeah." Miller shook his head. "More than that, they're declaring bankruptcy right now." About 8 months after being fired from Heartland, I stood in the yard of Davis, Riley, and Miller Transport, watching our fleet, now 20 trucks strong, head out for the day's deliveries. Our modest terminal had grown to include a proper warehouse and repair shop. We employed 40 people, most of them former Heartland workers. Heartland Logistics was gone. After the bankruptcy, their assets had been sold off, their contracts scattered to different competitors. We'd bought 5 of their trucks at auction, good machines that hadn't been looked after well. Our mechanics had spent a few weeks getting them back into solid shape. Scott had left town. Last I heard, he'd taken a job with a logistics company in Atlanta. The investment group that had bought Heartland from Miller had written the whole thing off as a failure. Miller joined me in the yard, leaning on his cane. At 76, he wasn't running things day to day, but he came by most mornings to have coffee with the drivers and share his wisdom. "Never thought I'd be back in the trucking business," he mused. watching a Peterbilt pull out loaded with big equipment heading for Minneapolis. "Regretting selling?" I asked. He laughed. "Nope. Best thing I've done in years." We walked back inside where Brenda was lining up the day's routes. Dave was going over the maintenance schedules with our head mechanic. The place was buzzing with busy work. "You know what makes this work?" Miller said, pouring himself another coffee. "It's not the trucks or the deals or even the money. It's the people." He was right. We'd built something worthwhile because we cared about the right things. That afternoon, I took a rare day off, drove out to the lake with Lisa, sat on the dock with fishing poles, not really caring if we caught anything. "Happy?" she asked simply. I thought about it, watching the sun sparkle on the water. "Yeah," I said. "I am." Sometimes the long drive isn't about how many miles you cover. It's about finding your way back to what truly matters.